40 acres and a mule, a phrase many of you are aware of but wonder where it came from. Well, today we're going to talk about it, talking about history hidden in plain sight. I find myself in Fayette County, Georgia, the 49th of the 159 counties in Georgia. Once parts of Fayette were Clayton County, DeKalb County, Spalding County, and Campbell County, which is part of Fulton today. But in 1864, during the Civil War, there was a skirmish that took place here, and the General Joseph Wheeler, a West Point graduate, was successful in defending Sherman's army who was marching through. You should note that Joseph Wheeler was previously a United States Army member, and after the Civil War, worked for the Army and was a member of the Army again. Well, Wheeler was from Augusta, one of the 5 capitals of Georgia, including Savannah, Milledgeville, Atlanta, and Louisville, and came back to defend Georgia during the Civil War. Well, in June or July, I think it was July of 1864, Wheeler defeated a contingent of Sherman's army as Sherman was making his march to the sea. About 200 individuals were captured here, and the skirmish at Shake Rag. And Shake Rag is exactly what it sounds like, what you get when you shake a rag out. I looked it up. I was trying to figure out what it meant, but it wasn't a well-to-do community, not the most prominent. And you should know that that was the name of this community prior to it being Fayette County, and prior to that, Muskogee Creek territory. So now getting down to what happened as Sherman made his march down to Savannah. They got to a place called Ebenezer Creek. It was in December of that year, very cold, and had been raining a lot. Well, Wheeler, after this battle, he had many more, and then found himself in hot pursuit of the Union Army as they approached Ebenezer Creek. By this time, some estimates say there were over 2,000, 5,000 individuals following about 14,000 Union soldiers as they went through Georgia on the march to the sea. And what happened there, the engineers of the Army worked with the pioneers, and the pioneers were able to do formerly enslaved individuals who were clearing the roads, but they put up a pontoon bridge. That's basically a makeshift bridge that sort of floated over the water that allowed the Union to cross. It's December, you all, it's cold. And the people who were following them were generally older men. And we're talking about now this group of, a lot of folks estimate, that were close with the Union Army, right there with them, about 500 to 600 individuals, women and children, infants, and the elderly, the maimed, the injured. They were following the Army for protection. They were following them for food, and they had many of them fled enslavement. And so now they're looking for protection. And so as they followed, and as they get to this particular bridge, an order was given that, hey, the Army, the Union Army, had to cross the bridge first. Well, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, there was not a second crossing of that bridge. Those individuals who were fleeing enslavement, looking for protection, were held at gunpoint and was told, do not cross the bridge. Needless to say, Wheeler, who was the hero here in Fayette County for defending this area against the Union, he was there, and he and his cavalry, according to the stories that I've read, slaughtered some of these individuals. And if they didn't slaughter or kill them, they took them back to their slave owners. But what was even worse, you all, is they were afraid, they being some of these formerly enslaved individuals, of being recaptured and going back into slavery, that they entered the water trying to cross. Men, women, and children drowned and lost their lives there at Ebenezer Creek. Now, again, the estimates vary. Some say hundreds, some say thousands, but ultimately it was one of the worst atrocities during the Civil War with respect to what happened as a war crime and what happened to newly freed African Americans at that creek. When they got to Savannah, the war general, the Secretary of War, Stanton, had heard about this. He actually beat Sherman to Savannah. And when he got there, they had a meeting with about 20 different preachers. About half of them were born free. The other half had been emancipated by themselves or in some other way. But they were preachers in Savannah who were the leadership. And when asked what they wanted, They wanted their own land. Ultimately, Field Order 15 was granted by Abraham Lincoln, which gave them 400,000 acres spanning from Charleston, South Carolina to the St. Johns River, I believe, in Florida, and going 30 miles in. They were to be given 40 acres to work, and they were not to be given a mule. That was something that later came, but the mules were around and were given to some, and it came from the Army's mules. But the idea is that they were granted 40 acres. They divided the land, those 400,000 acres, into 40-acre tracts. But unfortunately, after Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, it was reneged upon, and President Andrew Johnson took that land back away from them. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the story of 40 Acres and a Mule. I'm not a historian, that's my rendition, but when we talk about history hidden in plain sight, it's a lot to learn from there. And I told you I was going to tie in the Rapid Way to Win. Well, as I reflect on this, I have to say it's sad. But we've got to face the sadness if we're going to deal with history so that it does not repeat itself. We found ourselves, the African Americans, the formerly enslaved individuals, as between the Union Army, who would not protect us, and the Confederate Army, who wanted to send us back into slavery. We were not in a good place. And it tells me that in life, things won't always be fair. But it also gives me great pride in honoring my ancestors during Black History Month, knowing what they went through so that I can be here today. I've got to tell this story because I think when you tell this story, it gives humanity to the stories we've heard about the Civil War and slavery. I was never interested in learning about history because I did not see myself in it. But today I do. It gives me a different outlook on life. It gives me a lot more pride and confidence in where I came from and where I'm going. Today we're talking about history hidden in plain sight. I'm reflecting on that, and I ask that you do the same. I'm Joshua. Teach us. 40 Acres and a Mule. The massacre at Ebenezer Creek. History hidden in plain sight. Have an amazing day.